Good morning for WGRV. This is Reid Seals, and I'm here with Greene County Mayor Kevin Morrison for our monthly interview. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Reid.
First question, why make the tax rate the same for the county and city at this time?
That's a great question, Reid, and I know some people are upset and disappointed by the action that the Greene County Commission took, and nobody sort of sets out to punish anyone with tax increases or anything such as that. But let me provide some perspective, I guess. Greene County has maintained county school debt for a number of years. And a few years ago, the outcry essentially was, let's try to get Greene County out of debt. And in an effort to address that, the county commission appropriately started putting more money toward the payment of the school debt bonds. Now I'm talking about the county school debt bonds. And as a consequence of those payments and those bills being paid, the tax rate for the city residents who do not pay for the county schools, they do not pay county school debt bonds, those would equalize over time. If we start from the premise that the county rate for everyone outside of school debt bonds would be 201.45, which is what the county rate is, then the city residents pay $1.85 per $100 of assessed value, approximately, for their property. This year, 4 cents of those bond payments is going to drop off, resulting in sort of a natural increase, I guess, of 4 cents to the inside city tax rate. It happened last year to the tune of 3 cents, and it's forecasted to drop off 3 cents next year and 4 cents the year after that until these bonds are ultimately paid. The result of that would be a single tax rate for both the city and the county residents. At the May 29th budget presentation or workshop at the health department, the budget that the Budget and Finance Committee had presented to the commission through budget hearings with the different department heads did not have any type of tax increase. It didn't also have a pay increase for any of the employees, and trimmed the budgeted deficit from the previous year about $420,000. The budgeted deficit for the 2019 budget, the one that we're operating in right now until July 1st, was passed to the new commission and myself with an almost $1.9 million budgeted deficit. Now, for the last 3 years, Greene County has had a budgeted deficit, but has overcame that. But the budgeted deficit has steadily gotten worse. So the Budget and Finance Director, myself, some of the county commissioners sort of realized that we can't sort of let this trend continue because we get ourselves into a hole that we can't dig out from, plus the fact that we don't want to end up, for instance, like some of the departments that we're having to deal with now. So, given the fact that the city was going to experience these annual tax increases naturally as these bonds were paid off, the discussion was, do we just allow that to happen and allow the city residents to sort of experience these tax increases just annually, just almost incessantly, sort of like Comcast charges, I suppose? Or do we sort of swallow our bad medicine, rip off the Band-Aid, if you will, and level the tax rate and be done with this and not have to discuss it year after year after year after year as to why this is happening? So that is the reason, again, going back to sort of the timeline, at the May 29th meeting, I was quoted in the Greeneville Sun as saying that there's no tax increase of any kind. That was true at the time. Some of the commissioners expressed interest in having or adding the 2.5% increase that county officials were going to receive. And so that was added to the budget, basically taking it back to a 1.75% $1.8 million budgeted deficit. So we're going in the wrong direction there, so to speak. At the Budget and Finance meeting then on June the 5th in the basement at the annex at the UT conference room, some commissioners came over and were asking some questions about some adjustments to people's pay. It's rather confusing this year because there's 2 extra days added to the work day or work schedule. That makes it sort of hard to figure. There was some adjustments for certifications and things like that. And so they got their questions answered. But then the discussion turned to see if we couldn't get the school system some money as we retired. I'm talking about the county school system. See if we couldn't get the county school system some money from these retiring debt bonds. So knowing that there was 4 cents going to drop off, the discussion was, could we not just put that money in school debts or toward the school system for their future? Given the budgeted deficit, that really wasn't an option. The budget director said that he was probably safe in putting a penny over there, but probably not more than that at this particular time. So knowing that the tax rate was going to level over the next few years and the city residents were going to experience a tax increase annually anyway, and it's like, well, what if we just get it over with now? So that was the consensus of the group. Some of the commissioners, I thought, left having known that. Everybody, it was unanimous in terms of its passage. Let's just go ahead and get our bad medicine over with, so to speak, and then we don't have to be talking about annual tax increases, and the tax rate is level. So that's how that came about. Again, that wasn't done as a punitive action. That was sort of a natural reality that was going to occur anyway. We were just hopefully able to avoid the discussion of annual tax increases to the city in the future. So
Now, a lot of people are thinking that the city is now having to pay for the county school debt, and how is that fair to make them do that if that is the case?
well, Reed, that's not the case. Some people might think that. Again, it's a confusing issue. I can understand how people might have that opinion or have formed that opinion, but that's the reason we have two tax rates. The outside rate, which is 20145, if we start from the premise, like I said earlier, that the county tax rate is the same for everyone. So whether you live in the city, whether you live in Bayleton, Tusculum, you live at Lovelace or St. James, you live inside the city limits of Greeneville, if you're a county resident, your tax rate is 20145 for property. If we start from that premise, then the city of Greeneville, because they have their own school system, shouldn't be made to pay for the county school system. Particularly if we issue debt, so that we're not taxing the city residents for that debt, then we had an inside rate, and we've had an inside rate for a number of years, going back to, I think Todd had said something like 1974, 73 in his research that he had done going back to 2 different tax rates. So the city residents don't pay for borrowing money to pay for Greene County schools. Now, if the tax rate is, one might think, well, if the tax rate is level, then we're also paying for Greene County schools as well. No, the option there is that any city service that's provided to city residents is above and beyond what the county residents or what the county provides. So the city elects, for instance, to have a separate police department. The city elects to have a separate school system, the city elects to have a separate fire department because those services generally are seen more as an upgrade or more responsive. For instance, in the case of the fire department, the police department, and the like. And so, again, extra money would be required to pay for those extra services. Um, that's the case there. But the city residents are not paying for the county school system, and they're not paying for the county debt. But as a consequence of the county several years ago putting more money toward the county school debt service, then the natural consequence is, as those bonds, as those bills get paid, the tax rate equalizes. And there's really not a whole lot we can do about that, other than, do we want to sort of see this sort of happen over time, or do we, which is going to be retired in 2026, or do we want to sort of rip off this Band-Aid and get any type of ugliness and pain over with early and just be done with this? And we believe that that now that the tax rate is leveled, that we won't have to move off of the 20145 tax rate for a number of foreseeable years in the future. So that's sort of how the tax rates look, and the city residents aren't paying for the county school system.
Okay. Can you go over the capital projects for this next budget year and why you think they are needed at this time?
Well, we've established a priority read for three capital projects essentially that have sort of borne out that they're very much needed, and we have money set aside in our capital projects fund to pay for these, which is something rather unique for Greene County, and the fact that it has, for again a number of years, had a capital projects fund that they could deal with these emergencies. So the three capital projects that we've identified is a fuel point, basically to provide fuel services for Greene County, almost like an unmanned service station, if you will. The plan would be to have underground tanks that would have enough diesel capacity, enough gasoline capacity, and DEF capacity, which is an additive to diesel fuel for the environment, in one location, in some type of above-ground covered building, pavilion type thing, behind the highway department. We feel that this could result in a savings of somewhere between about 10 or 15 cents all the way up to about 25 or 30 cents a gallon for fuel for the fleet for Greene County. Now, you're talking about the biggest diesel fuel consumers in Greene County are obviously the highway department and solid waste. The largest gasoline consumer being the sheriff's department and the other ancillary departments of Greene County that have a handful of vehicles each. But again, we think this project, given sort of the cost analysis that we've conducted in consultation with Dave Wright, the architect, some fuel service companies that we've contacted as well to get sort of some preliminary rough estimates, is that we can have this project paid for in less than 3 years, and then resulted savings in fuel of 15 to 30 cents a gallon approximately, that will trim fuel budgets inside the overall budget of Greene County and allow for more efficient operation and save the taxpayers' dollars is sort of the main goal with that project. The other project is the TACAN radio system, or the P25 radio network, which is the Tennessee Advanced Communication Network and 800 series digital radios. Currently, the Greeneville Police Department and the Greeneville Fire Department are operating on this system and have very good communication and seamless communication, for instance, with the Highway Patrol and interdepartmentally. Greene County operates on UHF, VHF still, So our calls have to be relayed either on different channels or through, for instance, an institution like 911, resulting in fairly significant, and maybe significance not the word, but it does result in delays of communication. And the fact that we've sort of had some very close calls with regard to emergencies, um, most recently in Greeneville, uh, fugitive chases and the like, is that this system is needed for seamless communication across the board. Uh, it's my goal to see the sheriff's department placed in first priority to receive this system, and then the EMS to also receive the system initially, with future rollout to the volunteer fire departments, which again would provide seamless communication across all emergency services. It would be very much in alignment with 911 uh, for future dispatching, and just further put everybody on one sheet of music when it comes to communication, if or when we have a major disaster like the tornadoes. One of the lessons learned from the 2011 tornadoes was communication. Communication, command, and control in terms of response to that disaster was disrupted primarily because people couldn't talk interdepartmentally. So that added to some of the confusion and delay. So when we're talking about the lives of our police department, our sheriff's department officers, our EMS responding to a loved one having a heart attack or a stroke, uh, minutes count, seconds are valuable, and if we can reduce that with this radio system, then I think it's worth it. We've examined Motorola. They're looking at putting us on a payment plan over time. The system is fairly expensive, but it's very reliable and emergency service approved. So that's the second project. The third project is a voice over IP telephone communication system for the courthouse and the annex. We've had a number of problems with the communication system at both the annex and the courthouse, as they are very aged, 25 to 30 years old. We can't even get parts for the system that we have. Of course, IT, all of that type of communication gear is very perishable. I mean, our cell phones change in just a year or two. Computer information, computer hardware and software is nearly obsolete in just a year or two. So we've had a lot of complaints from different members of the public, different professional organizations, different governmental organizations about being able to communicate at the Greene County Courthouse as well as the annex. So we're looking at going to a voice over IP system. In fact, prior to this sort of project being added or considered, we are in a pilot program with Verizon, and they have rolled out a system to building and zoning that adds lines without physically having to install additional lines, for instance, into buildings. So it actually rolls over to two other cell phone-like things. We're going to roll that out as well to the county health clinic, as well as to some of the other departments inside the annex, to see if that's the direction we want to go. But we've already received quotes. I know this was somewhat of a project that was worked on across a couple of administrations, sort of without result. So we hope to move forward with something that improves communication sort of interdepartmentally and provides a little bit better responsive phone service, voice service to the public as well. So that's those projects.
Well, I want to thank Greene County Mayor Kevin Morrison for joining us today. And he should be back next month for our monthly interview. This is WGRV AM 1340 and 99.5 FM WGRV.